The Atlantic crashed against the rocks below the Vance family beach house with a rhythm that had once soothed me. Now at 35 I barely noticed the sound. I was too busy watching my father hand my entire world to someone who'd never earned a single brick of it. "The beach house is mine now, Elias," my sister Victoria announced, her voice sharp as broken glass, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. She held up the deed like a trophy, twirling it for the crowd gathered on the terrace. "Dad just signed it over as part of my partnership stake in the firm. Don't worry, you can still visit. If I approve the schedule." The guests laughed. Our father, Arthur Vance, 60 years old, 6 feet tall, and utterly devoid of conscience, slapped my back with the kind of dismissive affection that had defined our relationship. "Don't sulk, son. Your sister earned this. Focus on your quiet little projects." I didn't sulk. I didn't rage. I simply walked away from the party, from the laughter, from the carefully curated tableau of family dysfunction that had been my birthright. Instead, I stood at the cliff's edge, phone in hand, watching the sea. The message came through at 8:47 p.m. From Mr. Finch ESQ, Vance Builders, Property Council, "The transfer is complete. However, we have a significant problem. Review the new Riverside Revitalization Contract, Schedule F. It's structurally linked to the CFO position. Call me when you're alone. This is urgent." I read the message 3 times. Mr. Finch wasn't a man who used words like urgent lightly. I'd known him for 12 years, a meticulous attorney with the personality of a filing cabinet. Whatever this was, it was serious. I drove back to my downtown apartment, leaving the party behind like a snakeskin. Elias Vance. That was me. The name meant nothing in the company my family owned. I was the lead project manager, the invisible engine that kept Vance Builders from collapsing into its own incompetence. For 15 years, I'd watched my father run the company like he was piloting a yacht through a storm while blindfolded. For 15 years, I'd cleaned up after his decisions. For 15 years, I'd sacrificed everything to keep the firm afloat. Victoria had been promoted over me 3 times. Each time, Arthur praised her people skills, while ignoring the fact that her projects hemorrhaged money. Each time, I swallowed the bitterness and kept working. The beach house was the final betrayal. 5 years ago, during the 2020 foreclosure crisis, I'd poured my entire life savings, $340,000 in emergency funds, into keeping that house. I'd never told anyone. I'd simply acted. The house had been in my mother's family for 3 generations. Losing it would have destroyed her during the worst year of her life. My father praised Victoria publicly for managing the downturn. They mocked me as the office ghost. Now, sitting in my apartment at 11 p.m., I opened my laptop and logged into the firm's server using the master security credentials I maintained. As lead project manager, I had access to all construction bids and contracts. It was a responsibility I'd never abused. Until tonight. The Riverside Revitalization Project was enormous. $50 million. 6-month timeline. A flagship contract that would establish Vance Builders as a major player in municipal development. Schedule F wasn't a standard liability clause. What I found made my blood crystallize in my veins. The bid had been grossly underbid. Not by accident. By design. Victoria and Vanessa Chen, our CFO, the stunning, ruthless financial architect everyone whispered about, had deliberately omitted the cost of specialty materials and environmental compliance fees. The gap, $18 million. They'd planned to cover it with inflated change orders later, pocketing a massive initial bonus while the city remained unaware. But they'd made a critical error. A deadline clause buried in the municipal code specified that if materials weren't secured within 45 days, the contractor faced a $20 million penalty. Automatic. Non-negotiable. They were running toward a cliff at full speed and they didn't even know it. I cross-referenced the bid documents with recent wire transfers. There it was, 3 separate payments to an offshore account in Vanessa's name, disguised as vendor deposits. The amounts lined up perfectly with the underbid margin. This wasn't incompetence. This was fraud. I met with Mr. Finch the next morning in a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, which, professionally speaking, he was. "Elias," he began after ensuring we were alone, "I'm bound by attorney-client privilege. I cannot report what I know. But I needed you to find it yourself." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew. "Because," he said carefully, "your father is making decisions that will destroy this company. Decisions he's not fully aware of. Your sister and Vanessa have. They've created a situation." I waited. He sipped his coffee like it cost him something. Your father is having an affair with Vanessa, he said quietly. Victoria discovered this 6 months ago. She's been using it as leverage. The beach house transfer? That was extortion. Victoria threatened to tell your mother, who is, as you know, the majority shareholder despite her illness, unless Arthur agreed to the transfer. The pieces clicked into place like a lock opening. Why didn't he just refuse? I asked. Because, Mr. Finch said, meeting my eyes, he's weak. And because Victoria also hinted that she knows about the contract scheme. Your father is being puppeteered by both of them and he's too proud to admit it. I leaned back, processing this. Can you help me? I can advise you, Mr. Finch said. But you need to understand something first. You need to understand your own power. He pulled out an old folder. Inside was a partnership agreement dated March 2020. My signature was at the bottom, along with my father's and 2 witnesses. During the foreclosure crisis, Mr. Finch explained, you rewrote the core operating agreement. You created a fail-safe system. Tell me what you see. I read through the dense legal language, section by section, until I reached section 3.2. There it was. In the event of any asset sale, contract exceeding $15 million, or major financial decision, a controlling vote was required. The voting structure was complex, designed to prevent any single shareholder from making catastrophic decisions. But there was a clause I'd inserted myself 5 years ago in the depths of that crisis. If the standard voting structure failed to produce consensus, controlling power reverted to the individual who had demonstrated fiduciary responsibility during the preceding fiscal year. During 2020, Mr. Finch said quietly, you were the only person demonstrating fiduciary responsibility. The agreement was notarized, filed, and registered with the state. Your father's lawyers never caught the full implications because they were focused on preventing him from being stripped of his CEO title. I looked at the signature line again. My father had signed it. He'd agreed to these terms to keep his position, not understanding what he was signing away. How much controlling power? I asked. 51% on any contract exceeding $15 million, Mr. Finch said. The Riverside contract is $50 million. Elias, you don't just have a vote. You have the power to stop this. The weight of this realization settled over me like snow. Quiet. Heavy. Suffocating. What happens to the company if they sign? I asked. Bankruptcy, Mr. Finch said. The $20 million penalty would trigger within weeks. They don't have the cash reserves. Your father would lose everything. Your mother would lose her investment. The company would cease to exist. I stood up from the table. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. What do I need to do? I asked. I went back to the office and played the role of the defeated son. I'd been practicing this role for 15 years. It came naturally now. Arthur called me into his office mid-morning. He sat behind his mahogany desk like a king on a cardboard throne, looking vaguely uncomfortable. Elias, he began, his voice carrying that false warmth he used when he felt guilty. I want you to know how much you contribute to this company. I've decided to give you a raise. 5%. 5%. On my $140,000 salary. $7,000 a year. It was an insult wrapped in a performance of generosity. Thank you, Father, I said, and I smiled. The smile was genuine. It was the smile of a man who knew something the king didn't. Good man, Arthur said. Focus on what you do best. Project compliance. Leave the big decisions to me and Victoria. I walked out of his office and began my real work. Over the next 3 days I compiled everything. The underbid analysis. The penalty clause language. The wire transfer records. The timeline of decisions. I structured it all into a single massive document titled simply, Project Oversight Report, Cost of Incompetence. I made copies. I had them notarized. I secured the originals in a safe deposit box. And I scheduled an emergency board meeting using my authority under the partnership agreement. The system fought me. The office manager was confused. The board coordinator asked if I was sure this was authorized. I simply smiled and showed her the legal documentation. Her face went pale. The meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. on Friday, I told her. Notify all board members. It's mandatory attendance. Victoria noticed my calm confidence almost immediately. On Thursday, she cornered me near the coffee machine, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the counter like a predator's claws. What are you up to, Elias? She demanded, her voice low. If you try anything stupid, Dad will fire you so fast your head will spin. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear beneath the cruelty. I saw the child who'd been given everything and still believed she was a victim. I'm making sure the company stays compliant, I said quietly. It's what I do. That night, my mother called me. She hadn't spoken to me in weeks. Arthur had been telling her I was difficult and undermining Victoria's authority. He'd convinced her I was the problem. I'd let him because fighting it would have only made her stress worse during her recovery. Elias, she said, her voice still weak from surgery but sharp with the intelligence that had built Vance Builders from nothing. I received a letter from Mr. Finch. Something about a critical oversight in a new contract. My breath caught. Mom, you should be resting. Don't avoid the question, she said. I built this company. I know when something is wrong. Tell me. So I did. I explained the Riverside revitalization contract. I explained the underbid, the penalty clause, the $20 million exposure. I explained the wire transfers to the offshore account. I did not mention the affair or Victoria's extortion. My mother didn't need that pain. There was silence on the line for a long moment. How bad? She asked finally. Without intervention, bankruptcy, I said. Within 6 months. And you can stop it? Yes, I said. I have the authority. Then stop it, Elias, she said. And her voice, it was the voice of a woman who'd built empires, who'd sacrificed everything, who finally recognized her son's worth. Use whatever power you have. Do whatever you need to do. I trust you. I always have. Those 9 words, I always have, they rewrote something fundamental inside me. Friday, 2 p.m. The boardroom was all polished wood and leather chairs, windows overlooking the city. Arthur, Victoria, and Vanessa were already seated when I arrived. The city commissioner sat at the far end of the table, pen poised, ready to finalize what he believed was a routine contract signing. Arthur looked annoyed. Elias, why are you here? There's quarterly reports to review. I walked to the head of the table. The room seemed to contract around me. I'm here, I said, my voice cutting through the ambient silence like a knife through silk, because I am exercising my authority as controlling shareholder on this contract. I've called this emergency board meeting using my majority voting rights under the 2020 Partnership Agreement. Section 3.2. Arthur's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Don't be ridiculous, Elias. You have 10% equity. I placed the partnership agreement on the table. Then I placed the project oversight report beside it. 10% equity, I agreed. But 51% controlling vote on any project exceeding $15 million. This project is $50 million, which means I control this decision. Additionally, the contract includes a guaranteed $20 million penalty clause that makes this project exceed the threshold by $35 million. I opened the report. I showed the city commissioner the underbid analysis. I showed him the specialty materials cost that had been deliberately omitted. I showed him the environmental compliance fees that had vanished from the calculations. The commissioner's face went gray. He pulled his pen back from the signature line. This is not the contract I agreed to, he said, his voice tight. The numbers don't match my specifications. The numbers were deliberately altered, I said. I showed him the wire transfer records. I showed him the offshore account. I showed him the timeline of decisions that led to this moment. Arthur lunged for the report, screaming, Vanessa, what did you do? But I was already moving. I stood between my father and the documents. I am exercising my controlling vote, I said, my voice steady and absolute. Effective immediately, I am terminating the Riverside revitalization contract to prevent the activation of the penalty clause. The company will not sign. Furthermore, I looked directly at Arthur and Victoria. I am voting both of you out of all executive positions for gross professional misconduct and financial negligence. Section 4, Clause B of the Partnership Agreement permits this action when fiduciary responsibility is breached. Victoria's face went white. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I am. Mr. Finch has already prepared the paperwork. You're both terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Arthur looked like a man watching his kingdom crumble. Vanessa was already on her phone, whispering frantically. The city commissioner was signing a termination notice. The consequences unfolded with the precision of dominoes. The fraud investigation took 4 weeks. The city pressed charges against Vanessa for attempted theft by underbidding. She negotiated a plea deal and agreed to testify against Victoria in exchange for a reduced sentence. Victoria, facing fraud charges and the threat of prosecution, hired a criminal attorney and went silent. Arthur fought the removal. He hired lawyers. He ranted about unfair business practices and family betrayal. But the partnership agreement was ironclad, and his own lawyers had to admit it. He'd signed away his own protections when he agreed to my terms during the crisis. My mother recovered from her surgery with a new sense of purpose. She took back control of the company, but with me as her second in command. Together, we restructured operations, brought in new leadership, and began rebuilding the firm's reputation. The beach house. It belonged to the company now, per the terms of Victoria's property transfer. There was a lengthy legal battle about whether that transfer was valid given that it was obtained through extortion, but eventually the court ruled in my favor. The company retained the property. I chose not to live there. Instead, I used it as a company retreat, a place for employees to gather, to celebrate successes, to remember that integrity meant something. I stood on the terrace of the beach house, watching the Atlantic crash against the rocks. The sound was different now. Familiar. Peaceful. My mother walked out onto the terrace with 2 cups of tea. She'd aged in the past year. Stress and surgery and betrayal will do that to a person. But her eyes were sharp. They were clear. "I've been thinking," she said, handing me a cup. "About what happened. About what you did." "I did what was necessary," I said. "You did more than that," she replied. "You sacrificed everything for this company, for this family, for years. And they repaid you with mockery. But you didn't rage. You didn't demand vindication. You simply worked. You built something that would protect them whether they deserved it or not." I sipped my tea and didn't respond. "That," my mother said, "is not the mark of someone who's weak or boring or small-minded. That's the mark of someone who understands that true strength isn't loud. It's not flashy. It's quiet. It's patient. It's methodical. And it's absolutely unstoppable." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd built empires. This woman who'd raised a son who understood that sometimes the greatest victories come not from what you say, but from what you do. Not from what you demand, but from what you quietly prepare for. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For seeing me. For always seeing me. Even when I didn't see myself." She squeezed my shoulder and we stood together in the salt air, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Below us, the rocks stood firm against the crashing waves, unchanging, unmoving, absolutely solid. Like me, the beach house had been mine all along. Not in the way Victoria thought it was hers. Not in the way Arthur thought he could give it away. Mine in the way that matters. Mine because I'd paid for it. Mine because I'd saved it. Mine because I understood its worth. Everything I'd built had always been mine. They just didn't realize it until it was too late. The strongest people aren't those who shout the loudest. They're the ones who build while everyone else is celebrating. Who plan while everyone else is distracted. Who wait patiently for the moment when their quiet work becomes undeniable truth. If you've made it this far, you understand, respect is non-negotiable. My worth wasn't defined by my father dismissing me as too quiet, or Victoria stealing the beach house I saved. My story proves that silence can be a weapon, and patience, the patience to rewrite those voting shares, can be absolute power. If this resonated with you, if a narcissistic family has publicly humiliated you or called your dedication useless, tell them this: your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. Never let their arrogance define your professional genius. The revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. They thought I was a burden. I became the CEO who saved the company and forced them out. Share your story below and don't forget to like and subscribe.